champ now.
Yes, I didn't say. What are you looking so sad about, champ?
I'm surprised. I mean, I'm really insulted. That's not right, what you just said.
What do you mean, what I just said?
I mean, I'm getting a drink of water. I'm late getting on, but you talk. I said something about the greatest heavyweight champ, man. I'm a hometown man, and you talking about Joe Louis, man. Joe Louis wouldn't be nothing for me. Joe, I tell you, Joe, do you think you would have stood a chance with me?
Well, Clay, one time during my career, I bombed a Formula One tour.
I would have been a bum compared to you.
Well, you don't.
What's happening, my people? It's Cat Sports again, back for another afternoon with the family. That's right. You know what time it is. If it's Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., it's the Boxtorian bringing you all that boxing history. Boxing is the greatest sport of them all. That's why we love it. Can't get enough of it. Miss Cass, Define Irony 1, BN Boxing News, Thomas Hill. Salute to everyone. And welcome to another episode of Cass Sports, the Boxtorian. Al Booger, also in the building. Salute Al Booger. Today, the Duran-De Trilogy. Duran-De Trilogy. Mike Grimm in the building. What's up, Mike Grimm? Here we are at the beginning of another big week of boxing history. It has the family today. It's Trilogy Monday. Duran DeJesus today. Great trilogy back in the 70s. Three great fights between these two Latino legends. Okay. Still don't know why Esteban DeJesus not in the Hall of Fame. And I would never figure that out. But they hold out of the ring stuff against you, which they should supposed to be what you did in the ring, but they hold it against you because Esteban had that situation where he committed murder and ended up in prison. He's not in. And Michael Nunn got caught selling drugs, ended up in prison. He's not in. And both of those guys had Hall of Fame careers. So, yeah. It's supposed to be what you do in the ring, but they do. They claim they don't, but they hold outside activities against you because both without those two incidents, DeJesus and Nunn would both be in the Hall of Fame, no doubt. Okay, but how's everyone today? It's a beautiful Monday afternoon, and we're going to start out with our fight of the day. Okay, so let's start the thing off with the fight of the day. That's true, T. Hill. T. Hill said it's supposed to be impact to the sport. That could hurt the impact on boxing. Yeah, I didn't think about that, but that's true. Yeah. So yeah. I figured those things had something to do with them not being in there. So yeah, I can understand what you're saying, T. Hill. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna go way back for the fight of the day today. Back into the 20s. It's going to be Benny Leonard versus Lou Tendler, July 22nd, 1922. A close call for the Ghetto Wizard. Benny Leonard, one of the great nicknames in boxing, the Ghetto Wizard. Okay, so let's get into the fight of the day, July 27th, 1922. Leonard versus Tendler, two legendary lightweights. They say Roberto Duran is the greatest lightweight of all time, and if it's not Roberto Duran, it's Benny Leonard. And both trained by Ray Arcel. One did their best work in the 20s, one did their best work in the 70s and 80s. Both trained by the same man. Incredible. That is crazy. And time permitting, we're going to have a little piece on Ray Arcel after the Duran DeJesus trilogy. Am I coming through okay? Still haven't got my new laptop yet. I ordered one. I'm on the phone, so I guess I'm doing okay because Miss Cass didn't say nothing. Fight of the day, Leonard versus Tendler. Let's go with that. To start the show off. Let me see. Bear with me for one moment, though, please. How was everybody's weekend? I see Gabriella Fundora got the job done this weekend in her fight. I guess she was like the biggest name in there this weekend, I guess. Okay, fight of the day, Leonard versus Tendler. Thank you, Al Booger. Appreciate you. Okay. There's no disputing the oft-repeated truth that Benny Leonard will forever stand as one of the finest boxers who has ever lived. Now, not as well known is the fact that fellow Jewish pugilist Lou Tendler also deserves high ranking. Not only as one of boxing's greatest southpaws, but also as one of the best to never win a world title. Leonard and Tendler competed in what some consider the strongest lightweight division in boxing history, with Johnny Dundee, Rocky Kansas, Willie Ritchie, Freddie Welsh, Charlie White, Johnny Kilbane, and Richie Mitchell among the cast of excellent contenders and champions. during that era that Leonard and Tendler fought in, right? Okay, yeah, I was looking in the chat. Okay, let's get back to the fight of the day. Okay, Leonard bested them all in the process, establishing himself as the greatest lightweight of all time. But no one came closer to defeating a prime Leonard than Tendler did in their first meeting held in front of a mob of 60,000 in Jersey City, New Jersey. 60,000 in 1922. Wow. The official verdict after 12 hard-fought rounds was a no decision, a common result at this time. Now, it must be remembered that boxing was illegal in various jurisdictions, and even where it was permitted, it was commonly viewed as a most undesirable form of competition, as it attracted the reprehensible activity of gambling. Now, many states banned official decisions, the logic being this would both discourage betting on fights and eliminate the possibility of judges being bribed. As a result, if a fight went the distance, no winner was announced, and it fell to the newspapers to report on the contest the next day and declare a victor. Thus, we've talked about that before, the old newspaper decision, right? The old newspaper decision. There's Leonard and Tendler getting ready to throw hands. That's Leonard on the left. Tendler the bigger guy, too. Yeah, we're going to get into that. Yeah. Fight went the distance. You had to get a knockout to win, you know. So the champion, all he had to do was last the distance and he kept his belt because no knockout, no decision. Hence, newspaper decision entered the lexicon, forming a major component of Benny Leonard's career. More than half of his 219 fights were no decision fights, and the ridiculous rule actually delayed the great Leonard's acquisition of the world title. In 1916, he fought lightweight champion Freddie Welsh, but the gold belt could only change hands if Leonard scored a knockout. The fight went the scheduled distance, and while the next day, the newspapers unanimously declared the Ghetto Wizard as the winner, Welsh kept his title. Leonard didn't get the knockout. The following year, Leonard challenged Welsh again, but this time succeeded in forcing a stoppage, battering the champion with right hands and knocking him down 3 times in round 9 before the referee finally called a halt. The huge Jewish community in New York City exulted as one, the fans literally carrying Benny on their shoulders after his win. Yeah, he got him out of there, so the belt changed hands. And there is where they fought this fight at, Leonard and Tendler. That's 60,000 people. That's the ring. See that little white dot down in there? Yeah, that was a massive stadium in New Jersey which hosted Leonard versus Tendler. And this place was built specifically for Jack Dempsey and George S. Carpenter a few years before this fight on a farm called Boyle's 30 Acres. But that's going to come up in a minute. So Leonard got his title, though, okay? Now, the simple fact was, if the no decision rule discouraged gambling, a dubious conceit in itself, it did nothing to reduce boxing's immense popularity, with the biggest fights yielding huge paydays for both organizers and participants. The previous July, Jack Dempsey had defended his world heavyweight crown against light heavyweight champion George S. Carpenter of France, the clash producing the first $1 million gate in history and attracting over 80,000 to a specially built stadium in New Jersey called Boyle's 30 Acres. A lengthy list of public figures attended, including William Vanderbilt, Henry Ford, Al Jolson, Ralph Pulitzer, and John D. Rockefeller. The heavyweights was in there. Henry Ford, of course, invented the automobile, founder of Ford Motor Company. Ralph Pulitzer, know y'all heard of the Pulitzer Prize, that was named after him. And John D. Rockefeller, they were the richest family on earth at the time. William Vanderbilt was some famous person. I forgot who he was. But yeah, the heavyweights was at that fight among the 80,000 in attendance. That was Jack Dempsey and George S. Carpenter. First $1 million gate in that stadium they built for that fight. And then Leonard and Tendler was in the same place. Now, the man behind the Dempsey versus Carpenter battle of the century, Tex Rickard, knew a winning formula when he saw one and decided the following July people would again be in the mood for another big outdoor boxing event on the holiday weekend, 4th of July weekend. This time, he looked to the smaller men for a compelling matchup and found it in the lightweight division. It was the classic confrontation, Matador versus Bull, with Leonard the stylist and consummate boxer sporting a lightning right hand, and Tendler, the rugged southpaw brawler with the powerful left. While not as massive an event as Dempsey versus Carpenter, Leonard versus Tendler was easily the biggest fight of 1922. This, the consequence of the significant rivalry that had developed between Benny and Lou in the newspapers. In fact, Tendler had been dogging Leonard for well over a year, demanding a chance at the title. They had been slated to meet in Lou's home city of Philadelphia the previous summer, but Leonard injured his thumb in training, and the fight was first postponed and then canceled. There's a shot of Big Lou Tendler, big lightweight, right there. And one of the best ever in history to never win a title, Lou Tendler, okay? Now, Leonard canceled the fight. He said he injured his thumb, but Tendler didn't buy it. Everyone knew Leonard had enormous difficulty making a lightweight limit of 135 pounds and preferred competing in non-title over the weight fights. Tendler was so convinced that Leonard had walked away from the fight because of the scales that he insisted his manager collect a $5,000 forfeit, which Benny had posted to guarantee the fight. Now, Leonard was as irritated with the impatient Tendler as the challenger was vexed with the more popular champion. The two traded bombs in the newspapers, and the press gleefully played up the bad blood, stoking the public's eagerness for the showdown. And it was clear from the opening bell that Leonard had a very serious challenge on his hands that warm July night. An aggressive Tendler struck with hard right hands in the opening round, one of them opening a gash above the champion's left eye. At every opportunity, Tendler bore in, looking to pummel Leonard's ribs and slow him down. They wrestled and mauled in round two, Tendler landing borderline low blows. And in the third round, he continued to go downstairs, receiving a sharp warning from the referee when some of his punches strayed below the belt. Now, the action intensified in the fourth round, with both men getting home their hardest punches thus far. Leonard connected with a right that momentarily staggered his foe, and seconds later, Tendler buckled the champion's knees with a left. At the bell, it was the challenger again, landing stinging right hands, and it was clear the southpaw had swept the first 4 rounds. Tendler won all 4 of the first 4 rounds. That's a little promotion leading into the fight right there. Okay. Tendler had taken the first 4 rounds. BBO Sports TV in the building. What's up, BBO? From the Sports Talk Network. Doing the fight of the day back to 1922, BBO. Leonard versus Tendler. Then we got the Trilogy Monday. Duran versus Jesus. Okay. But salute BBO Sports TV. Okay, let's finish up the fight of the day. Now, Tendler took the first 4 rounds. He's trying to lift that title off of Leonard. But it's the era of the newspaper, the no decision. And if the challenger don't get a stoppage, the title don't change hands. No decision. Now, Leonard came back to take a close 5th round. And in the 6th round, he had Tendler bleeding and in difficulty after landing a series of rights and a hard uppercut. The southpaw appeared to be tiring, while Leonard worked to seize control of the fight, easily outboxing the challenger in round 7. But then came the 8th round, and the closest Tendler ever got to winning a world title. Yeah, Tendler never won a crown, but in the 8th round, he almost got Leonard up out of there. Almost. But this ain't horseshoes, right? Close, but no cigar. Now, the one tactic in the battle, which has surprised many, including the unflappable Leonard, was Tendler's use of his right lead. Instead of merely jabbing with it to set up his powerful left, Tendler had turned it into an offensive weapon, and Leonard had to be wary of it. In the 8th round, Tendler continued to be the aggressor, stalking Leonard. And about a minute into the round, he threw a quick, sharp right hand as he came forward, before unleashing a wicked left cross behind it. The shot landed flush, and the great Benny Leonard almost went down. His legs buckled, his body sagged, and he had to seize Tendler around the waist to regain his balance. He desperately held on, clutching at Tendler's arms and head and pushing him backwards across the ring as the challenger tried to break loose. And then, with Leonard seemingly one punch away from defeat, the ever-crafty champion began to talk. Yeah, Leonard was famous for that, talking during the fight. And he was in trouble, and that's what he did to get out of trouble. He started to talk to Tendler. Yeah, there they are doing the battle. Now, the newspaper accounts the next day all made note of Leonard's volubility, this smart, crucial juncture in the fight. According to some, he appeared to be complaining angrily to Tendler about his roughhouse tactics and low blows. Others would swear they heard Leonard and Tendler conversing in Yiddish. But as the ghetto wizard himself would tell it years later, he sought to conceal his vulnerability and buy himself precious time by calmly acknowledging the blow which had almost decked him. Years later, Leonard said, "I said, that was a good punch, Lou. I said it in a friendly, matter-of-fact tone of voice, and it put the fight on a different plane." Lou snarled, "Never mind that. Come on and fight." But I stuck out a restraining hand and said, "No, Lou, that was really a good punch. It was all right." Lou paused again, and by that time, I had recovered my senses. So he started talking and slowed Tendler. It worked. Whatever the case, Leonard utilized some quick thinking and crafty stalling tactics to disrupt the challenger's attack. In a matter of seconds, Lou's chance to inflict major punishment or stop Leonard had slipped away. And by the end of the round, it was the champion scoring with sharp blows as more blood seeped from Tendler's mouth. Yeah, and Leonard's talking tactics worked, and he got out of trouble, and he ended up winning. Also won in the rematch. Now, the 9th round was the slowest round of the fight, with neither fighter having a decided edge. But in the final 3 rounds, Leonard took control. Throwing his heavy right with greater confidence, he stunned Tendler several times during the spirited 10th round, and in the final 2 rounds, outboxed his challenger with relative ease. Still, some at ringside thought Leonard's rally in the later stages too little and too late. Yeah, some people thought Tendler still pulled it off. Okay? But thanks to the no decision rule, Leonard kept his title in any case. Even if Tendler won on the cards, it was no decision. Challenger got to knock the champion out. And he almost had him in the eighth round, but Leonard talked him out of stopping him. Right? Now, the newspapers the next day offered differing opinions. Most gave it to Leonard, but by the closest of margins. A few thought Tendler had done enough to earn the nod, while more scored it a draw. It wouldn't make any difference whether Tendler won on points or not, though, because he had to get the stoppage to win, remember? Ring Magazine seemed to represent the general consensus with their pronouncement of Leonard by a shade. It is testament to Benny Leonard's greatness that this would be the closest he ever came to losing his world title in the ring. The following year, he and Tendler met again, this time at Yankee Stadium, and this time there was no newspaper decision, as the great Benny took a clear-cut, official points verdict after 15 rounds. Yeah. By the time of the rematch, they had done away with the no decision, and then they were scoring they had judges and everything. In the second fight, Benny won a clear-cut decision. Okay? So now, let's get to the subject of the show. The Duran-De Jesus trilogy. Katie Plant was trying to stall out Canelo when he started talking to him. Yeah, that's what he could have been doing, Al Booker. Yeah, just like Benny Leonard did. Caleb was trying to stall him out, and but it didn't work like Benny's did. Okay, excuse me for one moment. One moment. Okay, let's continue. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the history of boxing in Las Vegas. Fight Town, Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay, before we start the trilogy, let's take a little refresher course on each boxer's style, okay? Starting with the Hands of Stone, Roberto Duran. Take a quick look at each boxer's fighting style. Starting with Duran, okay? Now, Roberto Duran's boxing style was that of an aggressive, relentless pressure fighter and technician known for his devastating power and incredible inside fighting, often described as scientific street fighting. Duran would relentlessly attack close distance to the ropes and use body and head movement to set up powerful, calculated uppercuts and body shots. Duran also displayed great skill in counterpunching and using angles, though he was at his most dominant by grinding down opponents on the inside, using an open guard and deft footwork to control the ring and inflict damage. Now let's look at some key characteristics of Duran's style. Okay, pressure fighting. Duran was known for constant relentless pressure, keeping opponents on the defensive and on the ropes. Inside fighting. He excelled at fighting in close, ducking under punches and using an elbow tie to create angles for powerful uppercuts and hook shots. Technical skill. Despite his brawling reputation, Duran was a highly intelligent and technical boxer, a master tactician who used angles to his advantage. Body and head movement. Duran utilized slick head movement, slipping and weaving to avoid punishment, while creating openings to land his own devastating blows, especially to the body. Power punching. Nicknamed Manos de Piedra or Hands of Stone, Duran possessed immense punching power, capable of finishing fights with clean, calculated shots. Counterpunching. He could feint to draw an opponent's punch and then unleash a devastating counterattack, effectively changing the momentum of a fight. Now, this is how did Roberto Duran style, how his style worked. This is how Roberto Duran's style worked. Okay? Closing the distance. Duran would attack relentlessly to cut off the ring, ensuring he was in front of his opponent to control the fight. Utilizing the tie. By using an elbow tie, he could control his opponent's arms, creating a defensive barrier and setting up his own attacks. Using an open guard. From the outside, Duran used an open guard, deflecting and parrying punches while using his lead hand to counter, transitioning between ranges. Duran could move smoothly from close range fighting to mid-range, attacking with more loaded strikes before returning to the inside for safety and damage. Experience and tactics. As his career progressed, Duran showed a great ability to shift his strategy using his vast experience and fight IQ to find crucial moments to take control. Take a quick look at Esteban de Jesus, then we're going to get started. Yeah, those are some great nicknames. Oh man, that's rough. You know, I was Al Booger, Ray Arcel trained both of them, and I was trying all weekend to find what he said about him, but he never really Ray Arcel never really talked too much, never really compared them too much, you know. He always kind of like evaded it. He never really compared them and said who he thought was the best between Leonard and Duran. But those are thought of as the two top lightweights. But I never could get an opinion from Ray Arcel on. Couldn't find him comparing them, you know. Just couldn't do it. That's Esteban de Jesus. So, man, I would lean Duran because I saw him live. I've only seen film of the Ghetto Wizard, so I would just have to lean toward Duran just because of the era. And I actually saw him fight, you know. Now, Esteban de Jesus had aggressive, hard-hitting, and powerful style. Known for his formidable punching power and a devastating left hook, de Jesus fought out of a modified crouch with a style that has been compared to a scaled-down Joe Frazier, using bobbing and weaving to close the distance before delivering all-out attacks of ripping hooks to the head. Now, while not a dance master, he moves straight ahead with a steady barrage of punches. Now, the key characteristics of de Jesus' style: aggressive and powerful. De Jesus was recognized for his aggressive style and tremendous punching power. Devastating left hook. He possessed a powerful left hook, a signature weapon in his arsenal. Modified crouch. De Jesus fought from a crouch, bobbing and weaving, and all-out attacks. He favored punching all-out assaults, which primarily consisted of ripping hooks and forward pressure. He was a forward-pressing fighter who moved straight ahead, often described as a steady drum fire of those hooks, and durable. Despite his attacking style, he was also known for its excellent durability. Okay, so now let's get to it, the trilogy. Crush the Legend. What's up, Crush the Legend? Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Have your coffee and your donuts with Crush the Legend. Everybody subscribe to Crush. Great show. One of the best shows in these YouTube streets. Might be the best. Definitely one of them. Okay, salute, Crush. We are starting the Duran de Jesus trilogy now. Okay, the De Jesus trilogy. De Jesus. Okay, come on. Yeah, there we go. Okay, this is called The Tale of Duran vs. De Jesus. Prologue. Now, the story of boxing is the story of rivalries, and rivalries themselves are stories. Now, during the contentious years of Hitler and World War II, Joe Louis and Max Schmeling made boxing history as representatives of two very different societies. Later, Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson thrilled sports fans with a rivalry that stretched over 9 years and helped usher in the television era when their final battle, the famous St. Valentine's Day Massacre, was watched in living rooms all across America. Then, decades later, Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, in perhaps the most intense rivalry ever, highlighted racial and political conflict during one of the most difficult periods in American history. But some rivalries are characterized less by politics and more by national pride. Boxing has long been enriched by the territory south of the American border and the fiercely proud pugilists from Latin American nations. There, the young men who fought their way to the top of the fistic landscape often found themselves the new folk heroes of the impoverished countries that reared them. Thus, whenever they competed, they no longer did it for themselves, but also for their nation and their people. Not only for themselves, also for their nations and their people. Okay? Okay. Panamanian Roberto Duran and Puerto Rican Esteban de Jesus found themselves embroiled in one of boxing's great rivalries. Over the course of 5 years, these two proud Latino legends faced off on 3 occasions. Each fight is memorable for its ferocity and for how it impacted each man's career. But the rivalry would ultimately be defined as much by what happened outside the ring as by the punches they exchanged inside it. Okay? Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Trying to make sure I miss nobody coming in. Okay. Now, Roberto Duran began his career in February of 1968. A fluid, aggressive lightweight who packed a big punch, Roberto quickly whipped up domestic support on his way to receiving a world title shot. By the time he fought Ken Buchanan in Madison Square Garden for the world lightweight title in 1972, he boasted an impressive record of 25 knockouts and 29 wins and no losses. After 13 violent rounds of rugged infighting, Duran emerged as the new lightweight champion of the world. Okay? There's him and Buchanan right there. Now, Esteban de Jesus was born and raised in the town of Carolina, Puerto Rico. And Carolina was just as famous for its penchant for violence and crime as it was for being the birthplace of Hall of Fame baseball player Roberto Clemente. Now, de Jesus saw action professionally for the first time a year after Duran and would then rattle off 26 straight wins before he ran into Antonio Gomez. Now, Gomez, the WBA featherweight champion at the time, was too steep a step up in competition for the talented Puerto Rican De Jesus. In the aftermath of the Buchanan fight, times were good for Roberto Duran, and Duran found himself arguably Panama's most famous person. Now, the fame and money attached to that level of celebrity, ironically, comes with a heavy price. Roberto was surrounded by those more interested in his earnings than the hard work it took to attain the level he had reached. And these distractions proved costly. The distractions proved costly to him. Okay? Man, I'll be glad when I get my laptop gets here. But anyway, yeah, these distractions proved costly. Perhaps aware that their fighter needed some time to adjust to all of this, Duran's handlers looked to protect their investment. A title fight was put aside for the time being, the official reason given that Duran intended his first defense to take place in his home country. And instead, he took a series of tune-up fights in Panama. In September and October, he recorded back-to-back first-round knockouts, and talk turned to who would become his next victim, this time back in America. Now, Esteban de Jesus was a reasonable choice, as his Puerto Rican roots built up a decent fan base for a moneymaker fight in New York City. And de Jesus had just recorded a win in the Garden some 4 months earlier. So they would say Esteban would be a reasonable matchup for Duran in the Garden. You know, he had a nice fan base from Puerto Rico, and he had just had a win in the Garden 4 months before they started talking about making this fight with Duran, right? But then disaster struck, and Duran risked not only the up-and-coming fight, but also his life. Driving up a hillside in his homeland of Panama, Roberto veered off the road, and the resulting injuries, while not severe, should have postponed the fight. Now, Duran suffered lacerations to his lips that required stitches, as well as an elbow injury. Customary to the Duran mythos, he shrugged it off, had a few drinks, and then made the trek to America. Okay? The fight stayed on track. Now, the first Duran versus De Jesus clash took place on November 17, 1972. The 10-round non-title fight would be the headliner for a Garden card that also featured Duran opponent, Villamar Fernandez. So the first fight was a non-title affair, okay? Now, what the crowd of 10,000 saw next would be history in the making, and a catalyst for one of the greatest feuds in lightweight history. Okay? Catalyst for one of the greatest feuds in lightweight history. Before the opening bell, attention was given to the featured guests of the evening, Willie Pep and Sandy Sadler. Two of boxing's greatest fighters barely got to their seats when the fireworks first went off. As less than 30 seconds into the first round, Esteban de Jesus landed a perfectly timed left hook. For the first time in his career, Roberto Duran's backside felt the canvas. Now, Roberto was up at the count of 6, both embarrassed and hurt, and the damage was done. Now, he never fully recovered from that first round knockdown, from the shock of it, right? In the rounds that followed, the typically active and aggressive Duran appeared flat-footed and disinterested, either unable or unwilling to fully commit to the offensive onslaught he was known for, while Esteban de Jesus took control of the fight, right? Yet the knockdown really affected Duran, more mentally than physical, right? Because he wasn't himself at all for the rest of the fight. Esteban took over. When the final bell rang, everybody, including Duran, appeared to know the outcome. And Roberto retreated to his corner in disgust. Now, the scores rendered by the judges: Harold Letterman. Wow, Harold Letterman. This is 1972. Can 53? Can this be the same Harold Letterman? No wonder he was the unofficial scorer for one of those networks. No wonder he messed up so much. The man is old. But anyway, the scores rendered by Harold Letterman was 6 rounds to 3, 1 even. Bill Recht had his 6 rounds to 2 with 2 even, and they fell in line with the referee, Arthur Mercante, Sr., who had it 5 rounds to 4, 1 even, all for DeJesus. Roberto Duran had suffered his first defeat, and 7 years later, when the 19 Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. The technical difficulties, but we're back. Okay, so let's continue. Let's see. Man, I'll be glad when my new laptop gets here. Okay, let's continue. Now I got to get the chat back up. Everything went haywire. There we go. Oh, wait a minute. Bear with me for one moment, please. Got to be able to see the chat. Okay, there we go. Okay, there we go. Am I back? Al Booker, give me a thumbs up. I should be back in. Sorry about the technical difficulties. Okay, cool. Thank you, Al Booker. Let's continue. Now, where were we when I was so rudely interrupted? Yeah, chapter 2. Yeah, they both were doing good after the first fight, right? Duran had 3 title defenses against 3 top contenders. And just as impressive was the streak for De Jesus. Now, attempting to squash rumors he was a flash in the pan, Esteban recorded incredible wins over Alfonso Frazier and Ray Lampkin. Okay? It was inevitable, with the role the 2 men were on, that their paths would soon cross again. Finally, on March 16th, 1974, they met in front of a rabid crowd in Panama City, Panama this time. Okay, Duran took that loss. He still had the title. He used his championship advantage. Duran, using his championship advantage, was able to secure the location and the lion's share of the purse. Duran got him to come down to Panama for the next fight, right? And he got the lion's share of the purse also. Esteban will have to confront Roberto on the champion's home turf, which during the month of March was excruciatingly hot and humid. Okay? Duran was used to that. He was from Panama, right? Esteban was the visitor. Shout out to Duran by the artist Damian Burton. Great sports artist. Okay, so now the second fight's going to be in Panama. Roberto Duran stepped into the ring that night with the full intention of erasing the memory of his first defeat from everybody's mind. This time, there would be no partying, no late night debauchery, or suspicious automobile accidents. The Duran that entered the ring that night appeared in terrific shape. Okay? Strong as a bull, but also as agile as a panther. But then it happened. Again. Duran attacked in the opening round, left himself open, and Esteban came over the top with his old friend, the left hook. The exact same punch that shook up the world in Madison Square Garden struck a second time with the exact same result. Duran again went to the canvas in the first round. Okay? The Panamanian fans sprang from their seats in disbelief. Was all the pre-fight talk nothing but hype? Would the smooth, slick Puerto Rican boxer box his way to another victory over their favorite son? This could not be happening. This time on the home turf in Panama. Duran is down in the first round again, okay? But instead of rising to compete with no zeal and retire himself from any chance of winning, like he had responded in 1972 to the knockdown, this time the knockdown sparked a fire in Duran. This time he got up off the canvas and attacked with fury. After the opening round, Duran assumed more and more control, and the third round was essentially De Jesus' last stand. Finding himself in a vicious foul fight, the challenger even never backed down, but he was decidedly outgunned by the hands of stone. In round 7, Duran put together a stinging volley of punches and a hurt De Jesus crumbled after a powerful overhand right. He had more to give, though, and Duran obliged. But the full force of Duran's attack was simply too much for De Jesus, who took more and more time to answer the bell at the beginning of each round. By the 10th round, the end appeared inevitable and was in a sense welcome. The 11th round saw Duran decked and exhausted and brutalized De Jesus, who just barely beat the count before the referee rightfully stepped in and stopped the fight. Okay, so now it's 1-1. Duran takes the second fight. Gotta have the rubber match. Chapter 3. Now, no one is ever satisfied with 1-1. Now, imagine if Ali and Frazier had decided enough was enough after their second fight in 1974. Or if Rocky Graziano had said to Tony Zale after winning their second battle, we each got to win. How about we leave it at that? The story isn't over until the final chapter is written. Okay? It's not over until the final chapter is written. We each got to win. How about we leave it at that? The story isn't over. Okay. Now, the third and final meeting of Roberto Duran and Esteban de Jesus took place in January of 1978, almost 4 years since their second fight in Panama. Now, the time between had been profitable for both men. Now, each held a claim to the World Lightweight Championship, which meant a third fight was keenly anticipated. The stakes even higher. The fight would decide once and for all, not only who was the better fighter, but who was the true champion at 135, okay? Because in between the second and third fight, Esteban had went out and got himself a title. You know, it was only WBA and WBC, okay? So now they each had one. Following his loss to Duran, De Jesus regrouped, and in 1975, he received the chance at Antonio Cervantes' super lightweight title. The knockdown 3 times, De Jesus dropped a 15-round decision to Colombia's legendary Kid Pombalay. But the Puerto Rican skills and heart were not to be denied again. Several knockouts wins set up another title shot for De Jesus. And knowing such chances were not unlimited, he made sure this time he was indeed the champion, right? He made sure the third time was the charm. In front of his compatriots in Bayamon, Puerto Rico, De Jesus outworked WBC lightweight champion Gus Ishimatsu over the course of 15 dull rounds to finally realize his dream and become a world champion. Okay? De Jesus wasted no time resting on his laurels. Within a year, he had defended his title belt with 3 stoppage wins. Okay? Now, during the same time, Roberto Duran had taken his game to an entirely different level, tearing through all challenges put in front of him. He was now viewed by many as pound for pound, the best boxer in the sport, period. Okay? Yeah, Roberto was thought to be pound for pound at that point. Mike Mazik is in the building, and Ant McQueen. Ant says, we got to watch. Salute Mike Mazik and Ant McQueen. So yeah, between the second and third fights, Esteban went on and got himself a title. Okay? So now the third fight is not only to settle their trilogy, it's for undisputed, you know, WBA, WBC. was undisputed back at that time. Okay, but so Roberto was thought of as the best pound for pound fighter in the world at that time, right? And the numbers, this is when he became the hands of stone, this period right here in between the second and third Esteban de Jesus fights. The numbers from this period speak for themselves. Duran entered the ring 20 times and he exited the action with the win 20 times, with only 5 opponents surviving to hit a final bell. In that same span, Duran produced 7 successful title defenses, 6 by knockout. And the question being asked by boxing historians was not whether Roberto Duran deserved to be regarded as a great champion, but whether or not he was the greatest lightweight champion of all time. Okay, that was the question that was coming up then. Was he the greatest? But there was one man that had something to say about that. Okay. But while all virtually agreed that Roberto Duran was the best lightweight in the world, there was one man out there that could dispute this claim, right? Because another man held the other version of the title at lightweight, and the man that held that other version of the title just happened to be the only man that had ever defeated Roberto Duran. Okay. So the stage was now set for Roberto Duran and Esteban de Jesus to meet a final time, with the winner emerging as a unified and undisputed world champion at lightweight, as well as the victor of their rivalry. Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas played host to Duran vs. de Jesus 3. And due to the magnitude of the event, it was broadcast on live national television. The stakes were higher than ever, and the participants were primed and ready. Okay? Now, Duran had obviously seen a pattern emerge from the first 2 fights, and this time he was cautious of de Jesus' fast start. Because remember, the first 2 fights, he went down both times in the first round. So he was cautious of de Jesus' fast start in that third fight. Now, during the first round, Duran switched gears and used his underappreciated technical skills. Duran's constant head movement and brilliant footwork came to the fore. His powerful combinations, artfully put together behind an effective jab. Now, weathering de Jesus' initial onslaught through the first few rounds, Duran soon brought the pressure and the heavy artillery to bear. The ever-confident de Jesus at first laughed off his opponent's efforts, but a graver mistake could not have been made. For the next 20 minutes, Duran never let up, and de Jesus could not fend off his oppressor. Okay? De Jesus couldn't hold Duran off in that third fight. He was determined. Duran came out very aware that he had to be cautious in the early rounds, and he got through those. And once he got past that, that was the end of it. Jesus was really never in that third fight. Okay? Yeah, there they are doing the third fight, right there. Now in round 12, an over-anxious de Jesus left himself open as he attempted to throw a right hand, an error that proved disastrous. And Duran beat him to the punch and scored with a perfect right of his own that sent de Jesus crashing to the canvas. He rose with difficulty, but Duran had always been an expert finisher. A series of heavy blows hammered de Jesus down again as his corner stopped the fight. The third and final clash was over. Roberto Duran reigned supreme. Okay? Epilogue. Now the trilogy with de Jesus ended. Duran's terrorizing. The trilogy with De Jesus ended Duran's terrorizing reign at lightweight. He now looked to campaign at welterweight, eager to win another championship and earn a huge payday with some of the boxing's biggest stars. Now, the professional careers of Duran and De Jesus never crossed paths again. In June of 1980, Duran secured the biggest win of his career when he dethroned welterweight champion Sugar Ray Leonard. The following month, De Jesus had his own big opportunity when he challenged former Duran opponent Saul Mamby for a super lightweight world title. De Jesus fell to Mamby by TKO in round 13 in a one-sided contest. It would prove to be De Jesus' final fight. That was his final fight right there for Esteban. A loss to Saul Mamby. That's still Duran and De Jesus in their final fight. Yep, that's still them in their last fight, Duran and De Jesus. Okay, so just a few months later, after De Jesus' final fight, on November 25th, 1980, Duran shocked the world once more, this time in a manner none thought possible. In a rematch with Leonard, Duran muttered two words that would haunt him for the rest of his life: no mas. He turned his back and quit, a humiliating defeat, especially for a macho warrior like Roberto Duran. Surrendering so abruptly and easily completely violated the code of the Latin fighter, right? It was tantamount to a crime. And many of Roberto's loyal fans turned on him with a vengeance. It would be years before he could restore his reputation with a great comeback win in the same building where he had won his first world title and where he had first battled Esteban de Jesus. Meanwhile, de Jesus soon found himself involved in a crime far more serious. The former champion had become addicted to drugs, and while in the grips of a cocaine binge, murdered a teenager during a traffic dispute. His trial and subsequent sentence to life in prison became one of the most scandalous events in Puerto Rican history. Never before had a figure of such renown and esteem crashed so quickly and disgraced himself in such a sudden and violent fashion. But the worst was still yet to come. The worst was still yet to come. In prison, De Jesus worked to reform himself, finding solace in religion and becoming a model prisoner. But in 1985, his older brother, with whom De Jesus had shared needles in years past, when both were using heroin and cocaine, died of AIDS. Soon after, Esteban tested positive for the virus, and eventually the symptoms began to appear. It was soon evident that the former champion had little time left to live. In a rare moment of mercy, the Puerto Rican government commuted Esteban's life sentence to house arrest so he could spend his final days among family and friends. Okay? So, Roberto Duran was one of the most passionate fighters in history. And despite the no mas debacle, he typified the Latino definition of macho. A fiery temper, coupled with his disdain for Esteban de Jesus, led to one of the fiercest rivalries in Latino boxing history, and a hatred between Duran and the people of Puerto Rico. And Duran never missed an opportunity to disparage the entire state. And the sentiment was returned as Puerto Rico hated Roberto Duran with a passion. Okay? But upon hearing of the fragile state of his former rival, Roberto journeyed to Puerto Rico to share one last confrontation with his old foe. And this final encounter defined their rivalry more than any fight ever could. Upon witnessing the state of his disease ridden adversary, Roberto put aside all fear and embraced DeJesus. And at the time, AIDS was a largely misunderstood malady. Some feared it could be spread through contact, but Duran ignored all such worries. He held his old rival and even told his daughter to do the same. The heart of the proud Panamanian proved just as strong as his legendary punching power, and the ramifications were immediate. The media, and most importantly, the people of Puerto Rico, saw their former enemy in a new light. The achievements of a champion are indisputable. They are defined through his wins and losses inside the ring. The character of a champion is more difficult to define. But on that day in April of 1989, Roberto Duran defined his character for millions of Latin Americans in a manner unique and unforgettable. Esteban de Jesus succumbed to AIDS on May 12, 1989, leaving behind a record of 58 wins against only 5 losses. More importantly, he was Roberto Duran's fiercest rival. Giving Duran his first loss, he may have awakened. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Okay, yeah, let's finish this off. Now, where were we? Yeah, he gave Duran his first loss. He may have awakened the sleeping beast, the true talent of Hands of Stone. Esteban may have helped propel Roberto to his destiny as perhaps the greatest lightweight of all time. But ultimately, what lives on is something more meaningful than 3 great fights full of intense action. Most surprisingly, what remains between 2 warriors after all that combat and struggle is respect, even love. Okay, Roberto Duran and Esteban de Jesus. Now I have something on Ray Arcel, Roberto Duran's great trainer. Yeah, Roberto Duran's great trainer, Ray Arcel. There's Ray. Yeah, Ray Arcel trained Roberto Duran and Benny Leonard. And like I always say, he trained Benny Leonard. Best work was in the 20s and 30s, and Roberto was in the 70s, 80s, and Ray had a champion in every decade between, except for the 60s. He took a little hiatus from the late 50s to the 70s. He had some difficulties with the mob around that time, and here he got out of boxing for like 20 years. But then Roberto Duran's manager brought him back in. Let's talk about Ray Arcel now, the great manager of the two of the greatest lightweights of all time, Benny Leonard and Roberto Duran. Now, Ray Arcel was born on August 30th, 1899, in Terre Haute, Indiana, to Russian Jewish immigrant parents. Arcel's mother passed away when he was only 4 years old, and Ray was brought up by his father. Now, before passing away, his mother, who was born in Brooklyn, New York, wanted to leave the Midwest and return to her New York roots. And the Arcel family relocated to Manhattan, first to the Lower East Side, and eventually to West 106th Street in Harlem. Okay? Now, growing up in New York in those days, Arcel told Ronald K. Freed and Cornerman, when they were making that movie, Arcel said, "You had to fight in those days. You lived in a neighborhood, and where you were challenged. You lived in a neighborhood where you were challenged every day. We were the only Jewish family there, but that's an old story. Wherever you go, they tell you the same story." Or Arcel continued to say, "If you wouldn't fight, you were yellow." Now, while he was training to be a boxer at Grupp's Gymnasium on 116th Street and 8th Avenue, Arcel was under the tutelage of two great trainers, and Di Darling and Frank Doc Bagley. Okay? Darling and Bagley. Bagley once managed the great Gene Tunney and taught Ray the art of being a cut man. Darling was a Welshman who had trained the likes of Gene Tunney, Al Brown, Jimmy McLaurin, Jack Britton, Ted Kid Lewis, and Johnny Dundee. Darling taught Arcel about the individuality of each fighter and the need to train them accordingly. Now, after a short career as a fighter, Arcel became a trainer, and that is when he established his greatness as a trainer, okay? Arcel's first world champion was Frankie Gennaro, who won the flyweight world title in 1923. In 1924, Ray led Abe Goldstein to victory against Joe Lynch for the bantamweight title. This was only the start. Arcel's subsequent success with numerous all-time greats cemented him as arguably the greatest trainer in boxing history. Arguably. Okay? Greatest trainer. He was even in the corner with Larry Holmes alongside his friend, the great Eddie Futch, when Larry Holmes fought Jerry Cooney in 1985. Yeah, there's Ray, Eddie Futch, Larry in the middle, Don King in the back. Tell Don King by his hairdo, right? Yeah, Ray. I never knew that until like yesterday that Ray Arcel was in Larry's corner along with Eddie Futch on the Jerry Cooney fight, right? Now, Arcel's beginnings as a trainer were during the days when boxing was the sport of all sports, when Jack Dempsey was the heavyweight champion. A Dempsey fight was magic. The minute he walked into the ring, you could see smoke coming from the canvas at Arcel when reminiscing decades later on the heyday of Dempsey in the ring. You knew you were going to see a tiger let loose when Jack Dempsey got in the ring. Now, Arcel's career as a renowned boxing trainer spanned from the 1920s, training Benny Leonard, all the way to the 1980s, when perhaps most famously he trained Roberto Duran. From the 1920s all the way to the 1980s. And remember, he had a world champion in each decade between, except for the 1960s. Yeah, I always said every decade, but the 1960s, he took a little hiatus. Had some trouble with the mafia. Okay, I think I got that in here. Yeah, but Benny Leonard in the 20s, Roberto Duran in the 80s. Okay, and they are thought to be the two greatest lightweights of all time. There's him and Roberto Duran right there. Now, Arcel was the oracle of boxing. A man who saw Jack Dempsey fight in 1916, befriended and trained Benny Leonard, was in Barney Ross's corner the night Henry Armstrong became welterweight champion in 1938, and was with Ross in the following days while tending to his wounds. He worked opposite Joe Louis on numerous occasions in the other corner, including the night when Joe Louis first became world heavyweight champion in 1937 against James J. Braddock. Damn, Ray Arcel was in James J. Braddock's corner the first night Joe Louis became champion. Shit. This man, wow. And the night Ezra Charles defeated Joe Louis in Joe Louis's final title fight in 1950, Arcel was in Ezra Charles' corner. Okay? This man got some history to his name. Arcel was in Roberto Duran's corner in 1980 for both historic fights against Sugar Ray Leonard. And like I said, he was in Larry Holmes' corner in 1982 in a momentous heavyweight showdown against Jerry Cooney. I said 85. I meant 82. Yeah. Holmes Cooney was 82. So Ray Arcel was in all of those historic fights, man. Wow. Yeah, the Cinderella Man, yeah, was against Max Bayer, defied Arnie Wright. But Ray Arcel was in all those historic fights, man, involved in them. He was in Joe Louis's, he was in the opponent, James J. Braddock's corner, when Joe Louis won his first world title. He was in Ezra Charles' corner in Joe Louis's final title fight, right? Wow. Both Duran Sugar Ray fights. Now, between the 20s and 80s, the only full decade Arcel did not train fighters was the 1960s. Okay? Yeah, he missed the 1960s. I just learned that too. I'm learning too. I just learned that yesterday. He didn't train fighters in the 60s. There he is. I don't know who that is. He's working with there. That's a young Arcel. Now, for nearly 20 years, from 1954, Arcel had quit boxing and was working as a purchasing agent for a metal company, right? I think he had some trouble with the mafia in the International Boxing Club in the early 50s, and he got out of boxing for its safety, right? Because he wouldn't play ball with the mob, and they was after him, kind of like. So he got out of boxing for its safety. Stayed out 20 years, but then in 1972, Arcel received a call from boxing manager Carlos Elita, right? Arcel returned to work with Alfonso Peppermint Frazier, who won the title under Arcel's training from Nicolino Loesch on March 10th, 1972. Now, the relationship between Arcel and Elita developed further, and Elita had a wild kid from the slums of Panama City, Panama, whom he wanted Arcel to train, right? Wonder who this wild kid from the Panama City slums was. Arcel's link up with this kid from Panama slums cemented his legacy and legend, as Roberto Duran became arguably the greatest lightweight in history, rivaling another great 135-pounder, Arcel's previous student, Benny Leonard. Benny Leonard. Yes, so that wild kid from the Panama slums was Roberto Duran. And there's him and Arcel and Carlos Elita, the manager that hooked Duran and Arcel up in the first place, right? Now, no other trainer has ever arguably worked with as many all-time greats with names like that Arcel trained, including Benny Leonard, Barney Ross, Henry Armstrong, Kid Gavilan, Freddie Steele, Tony Zell, John Henry Lewis, Ezra Charles, Larry Holmes, and Roberto Duran. So no other trainer ever worked with as many big names as Ray Arcel did. Wow. Let me read them again. Benny Leonard, Barney Ross, Homicide Hank, Henry Armstrong, Kid Gavilan, Freddie Steele, Tony Zell, John Henry Lewis, Ezra Charles, Larry Holmes, and the Hands of Stone, Roberto Duran. Wow. In a sport of toughness and meanness, Arcel was an anomaly. He was a very humble, polite, and respectful man. Arcel was described by sports writer Red Smith as the first gentleman of fisticuffs. Now, just like great trainers typically do, Ray Arcel always gave credit to his fighters, saying, the trainer would be nothing without the fighter. He would merely give them pointers. Now, it's also told Ronald Freed in Cornerman. That's a good movie too, Cornerman. That was about Robert De Niro played Duran and wait a minute. No, I think Robert De Niro played Arcel. I don't know. He was in it. He played Arcel or Duran, one of them. But it was a very good movie. No, Robert De Niro played Arcel, I think. But it was a very good movie, Cornerman. Now he told this guy, nobody had to teach Roberto Duran how to fight. The first time I saw him, not in New York, but down in Panama, I told everybody around him, don't change his style. Leave him alone. I don't want anybody to ever tell Roberto what to do. Just let him fight. Okay? Don't change a thing. Just give him pointers, like Ray said. Okay? That's all you got to do. There he is with, oh my goodness, that's Charlie Goldman or something like that. Charlie Goldberg, we get ready to talk about him. Now, of course, Arcel did have a real impact on Duran's boxing. Alongside an old friend, Freddie Brown, a former cutman of Rocky Marciano's, they molded a young Duran into an all-time great champion. They fine-tuned Duran's style with a power-punching brawler, becoming a very defensively astute fighter while applying pressure, boxing unlike any lightweight had for years. Under the tutelage of Arcel and Brown, Duran became one of the best and most crafty fighters in history. Okay, yeah, now this is an insight into Arcel's involvement in the careers of his fighters. Now, this can be seen through his handling of Charlie Phil Rosenberg. Yeah, that's Charlie Phil Rosenberg and Arcel right there. He won the bantamweight title in 1925. Now, when Rosenberg was preparing for this title fight against Cannonball Martin, it was on March 20th, 1925. He had 3 months to shed 37 pounds and meet the 118-pound limit for bantamweight after having blown up to 155 pounds, right? Arcel went everywhere Rosenberg went and did everything Rosenberg did. Arcel did road work with him, prepared his meals, and even slept in an adjoining bed in Rosenberg's bedroom. Arcel didn't let him out of his sight. In his biography, Arcel spoke of the nights leading up to Rosenberg's fight against Martin. I always had to sleep with one eye open. Charlie would try to sneak into the bathroom, right? And I would go to the bathroom and stand in the doorway. He kept cussing at me. I just want the gargle, he said, and I told him, I'm watching your Adam's apple. Don't swallow one drop of that water, Charlie. After this fight is over, Charlie told Arcel, I'm going to kill you. Rosenberg beat Martin by a 15-round decision, and Arcel lived for another 69 years. He had insight into how he protected his fighters. This man had to lose that weight, and Arcel followed him 24/7. Even put a bed in the man's bedroom and slept in another bed beside the man in his bedroom. And the man went to the bathroom to try to sneak some water. Ray Arcel was watching his Adam's apple to make sure he didn't swallow none of the water. Okay? Yeah. Can't lose with that type of trainer. No wonder he had so many champions. He was a hands-on trainer. Okay? So, anyway, let's finish this up. Arcel's wisdom was the stuff of legend. He said, ring sense is an art, a gift from God, that flows out of a fighter like a great painting flows out of an artist, or a great book flows out of an author. Okay? Ring sense is a natural ability to cope with any situation in a fight. It cannot be taught. Arcel's last appearance in the ring was in the corner of Larry Holmes when the Eastern Assassin stopped Jerry Cooney in 1982. Also worked alongside longtime friend and fellow legendary trainer, the great Eddie Futch, on that night. Also trained three men who can be regarded as the greatest in the entire history of their weight divisions. Benny Leonard and Roberto Duran are regarded as two of the greatest lightweights ever. Ezra Charles is arguably the greatest light heavyweight ever. To create such great fighters, Arcel's greatness as a trainer is evident. Okay? Nobody taught boxing while carrying themselves with the same sincerity and humility as the great Ray Arcel. The great Ray Arcel. Okay? And now, speaking of Benny Leonard, let's talk about Benny Leonard, his other great pupil. Man, I don't know what's going on. Bear with me. Again. There we go. Screen going on haywire. Let's take a look at the great Benny Leonard now. Okay? I mean, and I didn't show all my pictures. There's Arcel and there's Duran. Yeah. I don't think. That might be Freddie Brown right there. That ain't Arcel. The other, his cut man and all of that. But let's take a look at Benny Leonard real quick. The other great lightweight. If Roberto Duran ain't the greatest lightweight, then it's Benny Leonard. Excuse me for 1 second. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, if Roberto Duran is not the greatest lightweight of all time, then it's got to be Benny Leonard, okay? Let's take a look at Benny's career. Now, this should, tomorrow we're going to talk about the history of boxing in Fight Town, Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay? Las Vegas. Said my laptop would be here in 3 days. I ordered it Thursday. They probably don't count weekends, so Friday, Monday, too. Probably tomorrow. You know, they don't count weekends, right? 3 business days, I guess. I dumped liquid all in the other one that day, remember? Okay, Benny Leonard, the Ghetto Wizard, one of the great nicknames. Trained by the great Ray Arcel. Remembering Benny Leonard, the greatness of the Ghetto Wizard. Okay? Oh my goodness, I gotta get up again. Hmm. I guess we're gonna talk about Benny Leonard. Yes, we are. Oh man, excuse me one more time, please. Ow! Man. Yeah, I'm gonna invent those steel-toed bedroom slippers because I just tore my toe up again on the bed, man. The frame down the bottom. That'd be a good invention. Steel-toed bedroom slippers. Okay. The Ghetto Wizard. Now, in the long history of boxing, there have been many master trainers, gurus of the ring, who made it their life's work to mold young men into pugilists. Any list of great trainers and cornermen will have to include the great Ray Arcel, who started his career in the 1920s when boxing ranked second only to baseball in popularity. Arguably, no other trainer worked with as many all-time greats. Remember the list? Barney Ross, Henry Armstrong, Kid Gavilan, Freddie Steele, Tony Zale, John Henry Lewis, Ezzard Charles, and perhaps most famously, the Hands of Stone, Roberto Duran. And yet, when asked to name one boxer as the very best, oh my goodness, Arcel showed little hesitation. Benny Leonard, he would say, he was the best I ever trained. Okay, so there you go, Al Booker. Ray Arcel said Benny Leonard. I missed that. Ray Arcel said Benny Leonard. You was asking me about Benny and Roberto. Ray Arcel said Benny was the best he ever trained. And there is the Ghetto Wizard right there, the legendary Ghetto Wizard. Wow. Now, what set Benny Leonard apart? In Arcel's view, sheer ring intelligence. Sheer ring intelligence. Boxing is brains over brawn, said Arcel. I don't care how much ability you got. If you can't think, you're just another bum in the park. Now, Arcel can call them bums, okay? He actually boxed, too, for a short period. Something like 8-4, something like that. Now, people ask me who's the greatest boxer I ever saw pound for pound. I hesitate to say either Benny Leonard or Ray Robinson. But Leonard's mental energy surpassed anyone else's. Okay? Ray says the great Benny Leonard is the best ever. That's high praise. There's Ray again. Hall of Fame trainer, Ray Arcel, 1899 to 1994. 95 years old. Now, Benjamin Liner, the son of Orthodox Jews, grew up in the Lower East Side of New York City, where Irish, Italians, and Jewish ghettos ceased in close proximity. Street fights and brawls with rival gangs were simply part of growing up in that quarter. The young Benjamin received instruction in using his fists from his uncles, the logic being it was better to defend yourself with your bare hands as opposed to relying on bats or pipes. I don't know, I beg to differ on that. I'd rather hit a bat or a pipe. Now, the tutelage must have been of rare quality, Their nephew proved himself a street fighter to be fed, prompting the uncles to take him to the neighborhood gym, where he might learn the finer points of fisticuffs. At the time, Benny was 11 years old, okay, when they first took him to the gym. 11 years old. Now, he turned pro only 4 years later in 1911. But knowing his Orthodox parents disapproved of boxing, he changed his name from Lionel to Leonard. Okay, that's the story behind that. A few boxers did that, including Joe Louis. Remember, Joe Louis Louis was his middle name. His name was Joe Louis Burrell. But to try to fool his mother, he used Joe Louis, when he started boxing as an amateur, right? But his mother ain't gonna know that, right? Joe Louis Burrell, Joe Louis, right? But anyway, Benny changed his name from Lionel to Leonard. Like I said, a few boxers did that. He actually lost his first pro fight by a third round stoppage and would lose several more fights before he found his form and began climbing up the lightweight rankings. But soon enough, boxers felt lucky if they managed to win a single round or last the distance against the ring genius who came to be called the Ghetto Wizard. Before reaching such lofty heights, though, he had his parents to deal with. As Leonard himself told the apocryphal tale, one night I came home after a fight and my mother was crying. She had found out I was fighting. My father came in and started yelling at me. Fighting for what? I took out the $5 I had earned and handed it to him. He looked at it, smiled, and put his arms around me. That's all right, Benny, he said. So when are you going to fight again? Muddy talks. His father was laying him out, but then when he put that $5 in like 1916, it was a pretty good piece of money, So when he put that $5 in his father's hand, his father said, "Wow, when are you going to fight again, son?" Yeah. So yeah, they said it's okay if you fight, Benny. Just keep bringing that money home. Okay. Yeah, that's where I'm at right there. There's Benny against somebody. This was at Yankee Stadium, July 24th, 1923, against Lou Tender, the fight of the day, remember? I think this was the rematch, though, because the fight of the day was in 1922. Yeah, this was the rematch here against Lou Tender. That's Benny on the left. Lou was the bigger man, the southpaw. But remember, a lot of people thought Lou won the first fight. Benny was the champion, but it was a no-decision era. And if the challenger didn't knock the champion out, the belt didn't change hands. Simple as that. So it didn't really matter. The score was, no judges. The score was put in the newspaper the next day. But by the second fight the next year, the decision era had started. They had judges, and Benny won the second one on the cards, okay? If Lou would have got a decision in the second one, he would have took the title. Okay, so he got his parents' approval when he brought that money home. His father was like, "Fight? What you fighting for?" Then he put that $5. "Oh, son, when you fight again?" But anyway, as a ring tactician, Leonard was nothing less than brilliant. He studied boxing like an earnest grad student, spending hours in the gym, not necessarily training, but watching other boxers, observing their moves, footwork, feints, and timing. Approaching the sport from an analytical point of view, Benny found openings and weaknesses where others could not see them. Quick of both hand and foot, with an excellent jab and a devastating right hand, he was slippery and hard to hit. He countered with precision, making his opponents pay for the highest mistakes. Competing in a lightweight division stacked with top talent, Leonard proved himself the best of the best, wrestling the World Championship from fellow all-time great Freddie Welch in 1917. and holding it for nearly 7 years. He turned back the challenges of such excellent boxers as Johnny Dundee, Richie Mitchell, Charlie White, Rocky Kansas, Johnny Kilbane, and Lou Tendler. Remember in the fight of the day we talked about, they said that was possibly the greatest lightweight period ever. That era right there. Like it's 1910 to 1925-ish, around in that area. Yeah. Yep. Could be the greatest lightweight era ever. There were some big names back then. There's another drawing by Damian Burton. Great artist. Now, handsome and a natural born showman and charmer, Leonard was revered by the public, becoming a true celebrity and a massive draw in New York. His legendary battles with Mitchell and Tendler proved major events, attracting crowds of 50,000 or more. Part of Leonard's appeal was his clever boxing style, sophisticated and artful balletic in his constant maneuvering as he danced and darted. Benny, the supreme matador, always one step ahead of the bull, as he liked to often boast, while at the same time reassuring his constantly worrying mother. His peerless defensive skills allowed him to win fights without even getting his hair muscled. Benny's fans cheered with glee when, just before exiting the ring after another victory, Leonard cocked his head and proudly smoothed a hand over his coffer, right? That he didn't even get his hair muffed. He was such a great defensive fighter. Okay, there he is. Richie Mitchell, another great lightweight from the era. That's Benny on the right, a young Benny. And Richie Mitchell, a dangerous challenger. Another very dangerous fighter from that period. Now, Leonard was still at the top of his game and undefeated as champion when he announced his retirement in January of 1925. He had become sympathetic to the pleas of his aging mother, who could never bring herself to watch any of his fights. Yes, she talked him into retirement, but he did come back. Now, as he didn't mind admitting, Benny was a certified mama's boy. Besides, he had millions of dollars in the bank and nothing left to prove. You know, millions of dollars in the bank in the 1920s. Wow. Had millions of dollars in the bank and nothing left to prove. But the stock market crash in 1929 obliterated Benny's savings and compelled him to return to the ring. Yeah, his mother talked him into retiring, but he did. His mother talked him into retiring, but he did come back to the sport because of the stock market crash. Obliterated his earnings. Millions of dollars, wow. Now, the ill-fated comeback ended in 1932 with a 6-round loss to future welterweight champion Jimmy McLaurin. Leonard never fought again, but boxing was in his blood, and he didn't stray far from the gyms and fight clubs. He became a referee, and in 1941 suffered a heart attack while officiating a fight in New York City, and perhaps fittingly died in the ring while officiating a fight. Wow. Benny Leonard is regarded by many, if not most, as the best lightweight of all time, and no credible list of the greatest boxers of all time, pound for pound, can omit his name. As Scribe Jersey Jones put it, Leonard was one of the all-time greats, a magnificent boxer, a deadly puncher, a brilliant ring strategist, and an extraordinary showman, ruling over the most formidable array of challengers in the annals of the lightweight division. Yeah, that's it, Benny Leonard. Okay, tomorrow is going to be history of boxing in Las Vegas, Fight Town. Okay, we're gonna get France done this week for Thursday, and then Friday the profile this week is the life and career of the Gypsy King, Tyson Fury. Okay, yeah, we put this one all the way to the door. And Just Do Boxing is up next in these YouTube streets. And appreciate everybody for coming through today. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hit the like, subscribe. Man, I'm stuck on 968. Need 30. I had 970, then 2 dropped off. But somebody take their subscriptions back or something. I'm trying to, how can I get 1,000? People taking the subscriptions back from me. But I'm going to get 1,000. Okay. But I appreciate everybody stopping by. Make sure you subscribe to all the channels in here. And Castra's Corner, Crush, BBO Sports TV, Define Arnie One has started his channel now. Okay. Been coming on late nights. We had a nice one. Just me and Define Arnie Friday night. I couldn't hit the link. I had kept the car. I didn't want to wake Miss Cass up, so I just commented, and Define Arnie was up on the panel by itself. But yeah, we had a nice little show Friday night. Yep. So yeah, subscribe to Define Arnie. Check him out. Been coming on late night so far. He's gonna fit in somewhere eventually, earlier, or maybe late night is his thing. Okay, but either way, subscribe to him and all the other great channels in here. Earlier tonight, okay. Probably be on early. So you coming every night now to find Arnie One, or just, popping up right now? Okay. But yeah, I'll check you out tonight. I'll find you. Yeah. Because I was looking under Boxing Arnie, but yeah, it's look under Define Arnie. Right. Okay. But appreciate everybody. Join me tomorrow for History of Boxing in Las Vegas. Right. Fight Town. Got a nice little thing on that. We're going to talk about boxing out there, the history of it, and some of the greatest fights that's happened out there in Las Vegas, over the years. And yeah, I got a couple fighters that's from Las Vegas too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, okay, every night. Okay, cool. All right, cool. Define Arnie One. Appreciate you, T Hill. We're going to get ready to get out of here now. I got to go to the store. Store run. But Ant McQueen, Mike Mazik, Crush the Legend, BBO Sports TV, Mike Rim, Al Booger, the legendary Thomas Hill, BN Boxing News, Define Arnie One, Miss Cass. That's Victoria Thomas. That's Miss Cass. That's a government name. Right. But I appreciate everybody for stopping through today. Join me tomorrow for Boxing in Las Vegas. All right. Just Do Boxing is coming on next with that balanced, unbiased boxing talk. Everybody gets their Just Do Boxing. This is Cass Sports. Appreciate y'all. Everybody have a great afternoon.